Hey there! Another run with work in 3D. Man, I just can't even tell you how much I love this stuff. This is like super basic, but um, it is really fun, and I might even let you watch me nerd out on a few things. They might be little sub videos, but that's what would just happen if we were in class together, anyways. All right, so we left off with the uh, the mountains, the trees, and the eagles. Shoot, though, I did something here. I'm just gonna try to reset this. So that we're back to where we were, and I think this is what it looked like where we left off. I want to talk about some simple animation of elements in 3D space, but then also it's something that you generally won't use, but it's really good for you to know as a solution, and then it might even become a technique that you use in conjunction with other techniques, and that is going to be using a null object. It's also really good for us to understand what a null object is, how it works, because it's going to play a factor in a lot of the 3D work that we go down further down the road. Null objects are something that digital artists in animation and 3D work use all the time. So I can't remember if we ever used the null object in the intro After Effects class or not. But anyways, it'll be either a good refresher or a chance for you to learn something new. Just right off the bat, first thing I want to try to do is just animate the eagles flying in counter directions. So if I take my eagle number one and keyframe its position, I'm going to have it start off stage here at the beginning of my timeline. I only have 5 seconds, so this is just a short little piece. And by the end of 5 seconds, I want it to fly over here. And so that means that it's just going to cross the entire screen over the duration of 5 seconds. It's pretty low. Don't get in that bird's way. Might take off your toupee. This eagle here, I'm also going to keyframe it. And, you know, I may as well start it off the side as well, off screen. This is all going to change here in a couple minutes once we add our null object and have some more dynamic movement. But for now, at least, we can just sort of get in the habit of keyframing something. So bird off screen, and I'll put it, oh, I don't know, it's further away, so it's going to take longer for our perception of its flight. So maybe I'll just kind of put it somewhere behind the tree. And if I were to watch this thing in 5 seconds time, it's going to render real quick. If I was really working with a great computer, that would take nothing. I have a pretty good computer, lots of RAM. So there they are, they're flying. Oh, it's so graceful. That is our bird. I don't like the position of the background bird. So here's another trick you should definitely wrap your little brain around, and that is moving 2 keyframes at a time or multiple keyframes at a time. So since I'm looking at position, as long as my playhead is right over a keyframe that has been laid down in the timeline. So for me, I only have 2, and it's at frame 0 and then frame 4 seconds 29, right? So if I'm over either of those and I click on the word position, you'll see that it highlights both those keyframes. They're now blue. And if I had 20 of them in there, because maybe the birds are like going, whoa, you know, like all over the place, as long as my playhead is directly over any of those keyframes and I click on the word position and they all highlight blue, my movement will affect all of them. So what I want to do is I want to lift it up. And you can see that that straight line is staying straight because it's moving the first keyframe and the second keyframe. So now it's higher up and it's going, you know, yeah, I'm definitely more pleased with that. But we still can't even tell that there's depth. The only thing we can tell is that there are layers stacked, basically. So like, this tree is closest to us, but we can't tell it's closest to us. It just looks like the topmost layer, like if we were putting this together in Photoshop or something. The actual observation of depth doesn't occur until we add a unified element to either move that space as a whole or for us to bring in a camera. And we're not going to do the camera yet. We're just going to deal with this unified movement, and that is through using a null object. So I'm going to introduce a null object, and that is layer new null object. If you want to learn that shortcut for your keyboard, that's awesome. It's like all of the buttons. Well, it's not all of them. It's Option and Shift and Command. So there's no Control. And then the Y. I'm going to try it. So Command, Option, Shift, Y. Hey, null object. I just dropped one into my timeline. So the null object here is just called, it's called null 2 for me because I already put one in here a little bit earlier just to make sure I was not going to screw this up. But I'm going to call it master. So I just hit return and renamed it. So that's like my master unified control over this world. Right now it's not going to do anything because I don't have any of those layers connected to that null object. The other thing is that null object is currently a two-dimensional object. I can tell that because I look at the switches and I can see that the 3D cube is not checked. And so this little guy right here, this little 3D cube needs to be checked. So step number 2. Step number 1, introduce the null. Step number 2, make sure it's 3D. Step number 3 is a really critical one, and that is making sure that you parent all of the layers that you want to associate with this null to that null. In this case, all of these elements that I have brought into this composition are part of the same world, and I am completely cool with connecting them all to the null object that I've brought in. So I can just do select all, which is Command A. However, that selects the null. So I have to know how to deselect that null out of a select all, and that's just holding down Command and clicking on that null object in the layer area of that timeline window. So now it is not selected. So now to create all of these layers as children of the master null, which will become the parent, I need to use the pick whip or the parent pull down. It's your pick, whichever one seems to work best for you. The pick whip, since all of the layers are selected, that means you can just take one of those layers and drag it and point it towards master, let go, and it says, all right, all of the layers that are selected are going to become children of master, master being the parent. The other way to do it would just be to use the pull down, and then that way you can find the layer that you want. In this case, it's master. It does the same thing. So 2 ways to do the same thing. So now the master null object is controlling all of the world. But what's important about this null object and the way that it relates to these other layers is where it is in the world. Right now, it's hard for us to tell. We can tell that it's middle of the comp on X, the middle of the comp on Y. But it'd be really great if I could just maybe take 2 views. And sure, the top view is going to be fine. I'll zoom in just a little bit so we can see that better. So from the bird's eye view, not those birds, but our bird, wham, we can see the background layer here really far back. I think I put it at 6,000 pixels. And then we have this layer, which is the ponderosa tree. And then we have the bird number 2, bird number 1, and then the other ponderosa, which is closest to us, and we can see that here. The null object itself, the master, is still located, if I hit P, at a position of 0Z. And that's fine for now. It's totally fine. You can live it wherever. It kind of depends on what sort of result you want as far as movement through this space. I'm going to leave it here, but I am going to add a keyframe at frame 0. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Before I even mess with keyframes, I'm just going to show you what happens if we mess with our coordinates. So X and Y, so there's my X, and as I scrub left to right, you can start to see that things are moving at different rates, and that is because of this factor called parallax. And parallax is our interpretation of movement through depth. This is the equivalent of looking outside the car window while you're a passenger, not driving. Don't do it while driving. That's not safe. You're a passenger in a car and you're just driving down and you're looking out the window and you notice that the fence posts and the electric poles and whatever are moving at a faster rate compared to the cows that are out in the field, who are moving at like a somewhat slower rate compared to the foothills in the background that are moving even at a sort of slower rate, and then the mountains in the background much slower, and then the sky or whatever, slower. So that is how our perception of distance affects our observation of it. And what we're doing here digitally is trying to make sure that we're simulating something that is natural and that communicates to our brain that there is depth and there are things that are closer to us and they're moving at a faster rate than the things that are further away from us. Parallax. Put that term in your head because it's a really great way to communicate with other designers and animators. They understand what parallax is. So, all right. So as I move left and right, you can see that, not only am I revealing different areas of the background, but like the foreground elements are moving at a faster rate than the midground elements and so on. Same thing would be if I went, up or down. Unfortunately, I don't have enough content in that background image to go up or down. And also I see the bottom of trees and things like that. So you got to be really careful about how you construct your pieces so that you don't give away any of the magic, because the magic is what makes us really appreciate and love what's happening. But as soon as you see a tree floating in space or things not connected the way that they should be, then that breaks that connection of our understanding of what reality is supposed to be. And then the next thing would be to look at Z movement. So Z, the third dimension, is our engagement into that space. So if I were to zoom out too far, I start to see that, yes, that tree is floating and I can see the barriers of that background image. But as long as I stay within sort of my intended painting of this space, I can fly past that tree and maybe if I hold down shift, I can kind of move a little faster and then that tree moves out and I'm getting closer and closer to the background. That is truly where some of this magic begins. Okay, so I'm going to reset all of this. Position, reset. Okay, boom. So now if I just want to animate some sort of movement through that space using the null object, I've keyframed position at frame 0, and then at the end I will maybe move to the right. So I'm actually moving the null object to the left because it's giving me the sensation that I am moving to the right. And then I will also start to push in, maybe to right until that bird on the right's out of view. And what I end up with when I hit spacebar to actually render this thing is, I see the movement of the birds. I'm getting some sensation that I'm actually moving through that space. It's okay. It's okay. It's not that amazing, but it is different from me having to animate the tree Ponderosa 1, the tree, Ponderosa 2, and the background, like doing scale changes. I didn't have to do any of those. All I had to do was animate one thing. And it's that one thing, and you can see it here as highlighted by its path. This is the null object, and it's moving not just along the X and the Y, but it's also getting some Z movement. So this is the bird's eye view again. And you can see there's the background, the tree, the bird, the tree. And what we're doing is we're pulling everything closer to this default camera. And that movement helps us realize that there are some spatial differences and distances between these elements. It'd be like if you had a diorama in a cardboard box and all the things were like glued to little popsicle sticks or something like that, and you took the cardboard box and you started moving it towards your face and then moving it away from your face. That is the null object. It's just taking the elements in that cardboard box and it's moving closer to you and it's moving it further away. It's not changing me. I'm still sitting right here, but it's this box with all the different layers of things in that diorama that and that was diorama, not tiorama. Get that song stuck in your head and you're doomed for a day. Diorama. Anyways, I'm going to get you there. And it's just this movement through the null object. There's also lateral movement with the birds. They have their own animation, but I'm not animating anything else other than that null. So the null object is critical. What I want to do now is I want to go through the next video, and that is a quick further understanding of parenting childs and the null object and how that can work for other layers. So that's it for now on this one. We'll look at another example, and then we'll get into cameras, which is super cool, and lighting, which is great too. All right, thanks guys.